First, we're going to start off in Genesis 1:14, and we'll see what the stars are for, and the luminaries. In Genesis 1:14 it is written, "And God said, Let there be lights in the firmament of the heaven, to divide the day from the night, and let them be for signs and for seasons." This is the Hebrew word moed, and for days and for years. Actually, the word for signs here is ot. The Hebrew word ot, spelled O-T-H. That's the same word we find in Job. We find the word Mazarot, or Mazarot, and that means constellation signs. So the stars are for signs. That's what they're for. That's one of the reasons they're, and for seasons, and for days, and for years. And these seasons are seasons of for a certain prophecy, and they're also about the feast, Yahweh's feast of Passover, the Pentecost, and the tabernacles. They're all about the feasts. And the moon sets forth when the feast and the years begin. But then there are the ones I said, they are for signs. They're not for astrological signs about our lives, but they're his signs. And all that is written in the heavens with his signs is about his salvation plan, his Yeshua. Yeshua is salvation in Hebrew, who's came through his son Yahshua, or Jesus. It's all about him and his first appearing and second appearing, and about his people. It's about us, those who believe in him. It's about Israel, the 12 tribes, all the faithful of Israel. Now, throughout time, these pictures go back at least 6,000 years. Now, when we see the stars, sometimes we don't see pictures up there, but most likely these pictures are handed down from Yahweh himself, from the Almighty. He gave the pictures. Some of the star names and their meanings like head of woman, foot of woman, etc. So you can tell where these pictures are supposed to go. It's up to the man's discretion to how he puts a woman up there, or what she looks like. In fact, I was doing a teaching down in California one time. It was at a planetarium, and I was teaching on Bethula, the virgin, and also the serpent. And they brought the pictures up, and they had Bethula as a girl in a bikini, and a snake looking at her with her tongue hanging out. I mean, that's not the picture I wanted there, but I couldn't do anything about it. I didn't know until I got there. It's a kind of a strange thing, but there's still the woman is still there. The foot's in the right place, the head's in the right place. And what the ancient civilizations did as time went on, they perverted these constellations. They are about the constellations are about the one who's going to come and destroy the evil one. This is out of Genesis 3:15. And what they did is they took it and brought it to their own gods. They made their own gods out of them. And like Nimrod said he was the Messiah, and he wasn't. They were saying he was the right one. So through time, and the Greeks made their false deities from these constellations. The Egyptians made their false deities, the Romans the same, and they named them according to their false deities. So they perverted what Yahweh had set forth. But they are for his signs. That's what the scriptures say. In Psalms 19, 1 through 3, it is written, "The heavens declare the glory of God, and the firmament showeth his handiwork. Day unto day uttereth speech, and night unto night showeth knowledge. There is no speech nor language where their voice is not heard." So day unto day they utter speech, and night unto night they show knowledge. So there is knowledge from these heavens. They're showing knowledge. They're witnessing to the coming Messiah. And they're telling the story. And there's also certain times, there are certain events happening in these constellations. There's certain major prophetic events. There are certain signs that go on in these constellations. So they're showing forth knowledge. And there's no speech nor language if their voice is not heard. In the ancient times, most people were familiar with the stars and the pictures that go with them. And a picture tells 1,000 words. You don't need a language to describe it. You know, they see a woman, it's a woman, and the various things. You see a dragon getting his head trampled on, it's the dragon getting his head trampled on, you know. So so there's no speech or language if their voice is not heard. It's heard throughout all the languages throughout the planet. And as is written in Romans, that no one has an excuse, because these are things that Yahweh shows people day unto day. In his creation. This is part of the creation that shows these things forth. In Psalms 147:4, it is written, "He determines the number of stars and calls them each by name." Speaking of Yahweh Elohim, he named the stars. Adam didn't name the stars. No, man didn't name the stars. Yahweh, the Almighty, named the stars. And all these star names have prophetic meanings to them. And we can go back to the ancient Hebrew roots, and even in the languages that came after in the ancient civilizations, they all go back to the same meanings of these stars. Even though they have a different name because of for their language, they still have the same meaning as the Hebrew root word does. So he determines the stars and he named them. And they have prophetic meanings. So you can tell many times if there's a constellation that just doesn't seem right, you can go to the star names and find out what that constellation is about, what it means. I'll show you this as we get into it. Now this is a picture of the Mazarot, or the Mazareth, and there are 48 constellations in the Mazareth, and we're going to be looking at all 48 of them in this session. We're going to be going through all 48 constellations. But this line here, the circle, the double line, the heavy circle there, is the ecliptic. And that is the path that the sun follows through the 12 signs. It moves around, what's the mouse here? It moves around this circle through the 12 signs. There's the lion and the woman, the scales, the Libra, the scorpion, the Sagittarius. It moves through the 12 major constellations on this circle. And it's also called the zodiac. These 12 signs are called the zodiac. The zodiac simply means the path or way. This is the path or the way that the sun follows through these constellations. We sort of get a negative connotation on the zodiac these days because what astrology has done. And we hear the word zodiac, all of a sudden our hairs go up on that, just to me anyway. But there's a major difference between biblical astronomy and astrology, as I mentioned earlier. In astrology, most of the focus is on ourselves, of we should get up at 9 o'clock or 10 o'clock, or about our love life or whatever, and what sign were we born under. It has nothing to do with that. That puts the focus on us. The focus in biblical astronomy is on the Messiah. All the focus is on him. When the adversary gets us worshiping ourselves, we're actually worshiping him. It's all about the Messiah. The stars are not to be worshipped. These are telling a story. Just like the words in the scripture are not to be worshipped, but the author is to be worshipped. Same thing with the stars. We're not to worship the stars. We worship the one who wrote them in the heavens. He's the one that put these pictures here. He's the one that, this is like another witness to what his plans are, what his plans of salvation are. It's another witness to his word. And the written word always complements the heavenly word, and the heavenly word always complements the earthly word, or the written word in the scriptures. They never contradict one another. If you see a contradiction there, you either got the wrong interpretation on the scriptures, or you got the wrong interpretation in the heavens. They always are together. This is at 10 minutes after sunset on April 1st. This is around the time of the feast of Passover and leavened bread, where we have the barley wave offering, etc. And she's rising in the sky. She's rising above the eastern horizon. This is about an hour after sunset. So in the early evening sky, this is where she's rising. You see her rising in the sky. This is around the time of the Feast of Unleavened Bread. And then an hour after sunset on June 1st, this is around the time of Pentecost, she's at her highest in the sky. And at the Feast of Unleavened Bread, you have the barley. And then at the Feast of Pentecost, you have the wheat harvest. This is the first of the wheat harvest is coming in. And she's holding a sheaf of wheat. She's highest in the sky here. This is in the evening sky for everybody to see her. And then this is 10 minutes after sunset on October 1st, around the time of Tabernacles. She is setting in the west. So then after October, November, she goes down below the horizon, and she's not seen again in the early evening sky until Passover again. And she's describing all the feast. And you see a great shadow picture of Bethula when you go to the book of Ruth. Remember, Ruth was married to Boaz, and when she came to Bethlehem, she went to Boaz's field. And this is at Passover because she was harvesting the barley. And then she was there also at Pentecost harvesting the wheat. And then later on at Tabernacles, the later harvest, and that's when her and Boaz became married, husband and wife. And she was a Gentile. It's a foreshadow of the Messiah with his church, with his believers. And she was a Gentile. And they were actually both ancestors, direct ancestors to the Messiah.
All the videos I've done recently about Passover, then before that about the barley harvest, and how the 2025 Passover is the only Passover that the sun goes through Taurus in Passover on April 19th. And Taurus is the bull, just like Hebrews 9 connected with the blood of bulls and goats. No more on Passover, it's the blood of the lamb now. Jesus, son representative of Jesus, Malachi 4:2. And now come to find out that the barley harvest is which is what we are, the barley harvest, not the wheat, is in Passover. It all just keeps getting better and better. And remember the date, 419, April 19th, 2025, falls under the meaning of unsearchable in the Strong's Concordance. That cannot be searched into, inscrutable, unfathomable. And the further meaning of this is impossible to fully investigate, no matter how great the effort, unsearchable, impossible to discover, elusive, going beyond all human ability to even locate. I mean, the odds of this being under the number 419 in the Strong's Concordance, which is the date that the sun goes through Taurus in Passover in 2025, the odds of this being the definition of that number, April 19th, 419, it's 1,000,000 to 1. And now knowing that the barley harvest is in Passover, and also don't forget the other patterns for 2025, because if we're fruitful and multiply, 20 times 25 is 500. 500 in the Strong's Concordance, Hebrew, not Greek, is God ascends. And this is connected with Elisha, because Elijah's name itself, Yah, means Yahweh, and Eli means ascend or to ascend, ascending. So again, ascending God or God ascending, which is connected with 500 in the Hebrew, God ascends, which is connected with us because God is in us. Christ in us, the hope of glory. And amazingly enough, the number 500 in 1 Corinthians 15 is also used when it talks about the witnesses of the resurrection of Christ. It says that there were over 500 that were there and witnessed. So again, the number 500 being used. Every single number, every single pattern and story is there for a reason, and they're all leaving us clues and hints and leading us down a path. 500 is God ascends, and in the Strong's Greek, it's Antichrist. And this all matches up with Revelation chapter 12. The man-child was caught up. We are symbolic of the man-child. Christ in us. And what happens? Michael and the angels kick Satan and the devils out of heaven, which is connected. The Antichrist is on earth now, and he has 42 months, which connects with 500 in the Greek, Antichrist, all in 2025. And the 3.5 years after that in the Strong's Concordance, as I've shown, 2026, 27, and 28, is to kill and slay, slaughter, slaughter. And then in the Hebrew, it's blind, blind, and blindness for those 3.5 years. And then in 2029, what people call the second coming happens, and Jesus Christ does come back. As you can see here, Psalms chapter 2, verse 9 to 29 talks about Jesus coming back. And I've shown Psalms chapter 2 and Romans chapter 11, there are these patterns that match up with the events and the years. For instance, in Romans chapter 11, verse 25, it talks about the fullness of the Gentiles. The dispensation of grace basically being fulfilled. And the pattern there being the 25, verse 25 for 2025. Then you have 26, 27, 28, and 29 talking directly about Israel and the Messiah and him turning Jacob away from their sins, and then giving gifts at the end in 29 when he gets back. These patterns are all over the Bible. I believe what we're looking at when we turn to Revelation chapter 6 and the first seal opening, all the way to the seventh seal and then the 7 trumpets with God's wrath, I believe that is all within a 3.5 year period, starting in 25. And we see this all over the Bible, only 42 months talked about. In Daniel chapter 12, and Revelation chapter 12, and other chapters in Revelation, And also when Jesus was speaking in the book of Luke, chapter 4. A lot of people have been told that's a 7-year period, and some people have been told, well, the first seal was opened 2,000 years ago. And I think even I've said that it's probably been open for 2,000 years. I don't see it like that anymore. I see it as a 3.5-year period. We're in Luke chapter 4 here, and I'm going to show you guys something really special. So pay attention. This was shown to me, and I want to show it to you guys. Luke chapter 4, starting at verse 14. And Jesus returned in the power of the Spirit into Galilee. And there went out a fame of him through all the region round about. And he taught in their synagogues, being glorified of all. And he came to Nazareth, where he had been brought up, and as his custom was, he went into the synagogue on the Sabbath day and stood up for to read. And there was delivered unto him the book of the prophet Isaiah. And when he had opened the book, he found the place where it was written. Now he's quoting, okay? Now he's quoting from the Old Testament prophecy, okay? It says this, the Spirit of the Lord is upon me, because he hath anointed me to preach the gospel to the poor. He hath sent me to heal the brokenhearted, to preach deliverance to the captives, and recovering of sight to the blind, to set at liberty them that are bruised, to preach the acceptable year of the Lord. And he closed the book, and he gave it again to the minister, and sat down, and the eyes of all them that were in the synagogue were fastened on him. Do you know that Jesus left out the part in that prophecy about the vengeance of the Lord? He left it out. He did not finish reading that prophecy. You know why? Because that's what's left, is the vengeance. And it didn't happen. This was when he was here. He did not read the vengeance because it wasn't fulfilled yet. Verse 21, and he began to say unto them, this day is the scripture fulfilled in your eyes. And all bare witness and wondered at the gracious words which proceeded out of his mouth. And they said, is not this Joseph's son? And he said unto them, ye will surely say unto me this proverb, Physician, heal thyself, whatsoever we have heard done in Capernaum, do also here in thy country. And he said, truly I say unto you, no prophet is accepted in his own country. But I tell you of a truth, many widows were in Israel in the days of Elias. Now listen, when the heaven was shut up 3 years and 6 months, when great famine was throughout all the land. But unto none of them was Elias sent, save unto Sarepta, a city of Sidon, unto a woman that was a widow. That's a shadow of things to come in 26, 2027, and 2028. As I've shown you in the Strong's Concordance, that those years in the Concordance, the words that fall under them are slaughter and blindness. That is what that is here. It's all a repetitive pattern. Ecclesiastes 1:9, Ecclesiastes 3:15. What was done will be done again. There's nothing new under the sun. These things must repeat themselves. God requires it. That's exactly what this is.